So I want to start with the idea of how feminism and Marxism aren't contrary to each other. So I've read a lot of Marxist feminist literature, especially from Dubois, and they do actually seem to be a contradiction. So through first wave feminism to modernity, feminism has single-handedly put more women in the hands of rich industrialists than any other single movement which has ever existed. Rich capitalist industrialists are now basically in charge of women. Women are part of the market workforce now. They never were. As part of the market workforce, they have now accrued almost as much debt in 100 years as men, which is incredible. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. There's only a few. One of the big ones is student loans, but I mean, they're almost on point with everything else. There's very, very few market indicators where they hold significantly less debt than men do.
From my understanding, the only place where women do hold more debt is student loans. Men hold more in credit cards and.
It's true. Well, credit cards, it could be that we don't know because we get it from the credit card reporting agency, but it's like a 2% margin. So maybe they hold less, maybe they hold, I'm not sure, but it's not significant. Like none of these thresholds I look at look very significant to me. So what I'm trying to figure out is Marxism, and maybe we can clear up the semantic here too, but Marxism is looking for a stateless society where where capitalism is gone, right? Uh-huh. So if capitalism is gone, how is feeding millions upon millions of women to the capitalist machine via feminism a good idea for Marxism? It makes no sense to me.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about first wave feminism, I don't like to necessarily define feminism based on its wave, because I think it ignores certain sects within feminism that are outside of that, as well as kind of puts it in a Western purview. But I will say, obviously, there are different modes of feminism that we've seen in place throughout history, and I would just say this was liberal feminism, which obviously is towards the movement of upward mobility within capitalism.
Yeah, but why would you support that?
I wouldn't. I would be against liberal feminism.
Then how are you a feminist? Well, what kind of feminist are you?
Marxist intersectional feminist.
Okay, yeah, Marxist intersectional, but
right.
You did rely on first wave, second wave, third wave, fourth wave feminism.
Yeah, so there is progression, obviously, over time. I'm sure you have, I know I've heard you say that with your Christian populism, your plan is 300 years. So obviously there's going to be different steps that you take over time. I think when it comes to, if we're going to talk about liberal feminism and women entering the market when it comes to economic work, is that one of the ways we see that women have faced oppression or marginalization or subjugation, whatever term you want to use, is obviously patriarchy's construction of dependency on men.
But they were more liberated. So men held the debt, not women. So I would argue immediately.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no problem. I would argue immediately that because women now hold so much debt, they're less liberated than they ever have been, at least in this nation. So I would point you to things like before they had the right to vote, the 19th Amendment, they were able to pass the 18th Amendment. That was literally due to the women's temperance movement. And they did not have the right to vote at that time, but they had so much moral political power that they were able to pass that. So they definitely had political power and they had no debt. I don't see how this is more liberating.
Well, I don't think a lot of people had debt during that time.
Yeah, men had a lot of debt. Men, they had all the debt.
Individual debt?
They had all the debt. All of it.
Sure, but
1% to 2% maybe for women.
Sure. So, I mean, if we're talking about, do I think debt is a good thing? No, that would be a critique against capitalism. The critique that with feminism in that specific instance that you've given is that the only way to get access to the material goods of life is obviously through money. And so when women are able to participate in the market, then they are dependent on men in order to get housing, to get food, to get shelter, so on and so forth, or they're paid very low wages. And so I think expanding that market then creates more individual opportunities to where you don't have to get married, to where you can have more autonomy in your choice.
Yeah, but this is really this is a very odd position that I don't think stacks up very well. So if the idea is women need to be able to gain more materialism, that is in conflict with Marxism, which is
I
saying
agree. I'm
that
saying
women,
that's under capitalism.
yeah, but we live in capitalism.
Sure.
And we did then.
I understand that.
So the thing is like, it seems very contradictory to me to say, well, okay, access to materialism.
Hold on. Sorry. What's going on?
I was trying to turn off the bait. That's my bad.
Okay, I apologize.
Yeah, no problem.
We have a new.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So it's just really bizarre to me when you say women need to be able to access materialism in order to be less oppressed, when now women they have, by the way, I mean, their student loan debt alone is insane. They're now under the yoke of capitalism more significantly than they ever have been because of this accruement of debt. So it seems like you're just feeding them into the system while calling it liberation, when rich industrialists owned them then and own them now.
So, I mean, it's a more intersectional look at that. Like, I do agree with you that capitalism in itself and like the concept of debt is oppressive. So yes, you are correct when you say that assessment. But if we're looking at the intersection, what's the alternative under capitalism for women to be dependent on access to the basic materials?
That seems far and away to me to be a way better system if you wanted to actually institute Marxism. So I'll explain why. If it were to use the accelerationist argument, which it sounds like you're trying to do, move into accelerationism, we would just have fascism. Like that's what we usually end up with.
What do you mean? I'm sorry.
Right-wing authoritarianism.
Well, I know what you mean by fascism. Can you repeat your point, though?
Yeah. So if the idea is women need to be moved into the rich industrialist market for some reason because it's more liberating for them to have more materialism, which it seems to be completely the opposite. Because
more opportunity.
For what, though? To ingratiate more materialism?
No, I would even just say like the standard means of living.
Materialism.
I don't know, like,
well,
we need housing, right? Is that materialism?
Yeah, well, yeah, it is.
Okay.
Like, depending on the size of the house. And I mean, so when you say housing, what does that encompass? Like a commie block? Like a stone commie block where it's like little
I think
tiny...
we can agree like on what basic necessities humans need in order to function within society. And I would say housing would be definitely a
Sure,
core
but how
tenet.
big?
I think it would depend, obviously, based on need.
Yeah, right. So
utility.
if it's moving off of need, right? Mm-hmm. I would say that people need very little space.
Okay.
Right?
Sure.
So if this is the case, though, introducing women into the capitalist market, right, where now rich industrialists own their labor, which they do, in order to give them the right to vote about stuff that's kind of meaningless ultimately towards themselves. What was the point of that for Marxism? It's totally counterintuitive.
Well, I'm not saying it's a movement towards Marxism. I'm saying that that's obviously like a liberal feminist movement, which is upward mobility within capitalism so that you can have access to.
So you don't support feminism?
I don't support liberal feminism.
But that's the only type of feminism we've had here.
In terms of certain movements, sure. I guess it would depend on how you classify certain movements. But when we're talking about like capitalist critique, those who think that women would find liberation having the same access to capitalist opportunities as men is a liberal feminist idea.
But I don't understand then. So do you support Western feminism or not?
I don't, if you want to label it as that Western feminism.
Like, well, okay, so the only feminism that I can point to is either the feminism here, or we can talk about communist feminism, but that was liberalized as well.
I disagree. I think we can see, like, when the Black Panthers in the 60s and 70s, that's where womanism was born out of, which is also Marxist theory.
Yeah, sure, but it was also part of a feminist movement.
Right.
The sexual liberation was a big part of what was going on in the 60s with Black Panther and female liberation too. Mm-hmm. So I'm just curious though, first wave feminism, you agree, essentially fed all women into this massive capitalist machine, whereas they did not have to participate in it before.
Again, like, I think that's a really exclusionary idea of first wave feminism, because there were also like feminists who were abolitionists. There were also feminists who were poor, who wanted more rights for the working class, and those were kind of ignored. So I think if you want to label first wave feminism as essentially the suffragette movement, and the means to enter capitalist, I don't think that's all encompassing of feminism.
First wave feminism is definitely responsible for millions upon millions upon millions of women entering into the workforce under rich capitalist industrialists. Single-handedly responsible for that.
Okay.
What else would it be that would be responsible for that?
Well, I think that's obviously what's at the forefront.
Yeah.
But there are other sects of feminism that we're dealing with abolition. We're dealing with
they never had any political power.
Okay.
So,
I mean, we had the 1912 Lawrence textile strike, which was about working conditions.
Yeah, but feminists have always moved towards working. But this is the problem again. Working conditions for what? To capitalism? To the working capitalist plants?
I guess I'm not sure, like, what your overarching question
My
is.
overarching point is, why would you support if you don't support first wave feminism, because it fed millions upon millions of women into the pocket in the pocket of rich industrialists, which it did, and you agree it did, and the second wave did, and the third wave, and now even the fourth wave. None of these feminist waves are anti-capitalist.
No, I agree.